Well, good morning. It is Tuesday, the 25th day of August.
Eyewitnesses say the lorry...
Glad you joined us right here on TV47. My name is Linda Alala. It is time for Morning Cafe, that morning program that keeps you updated on what is happening on matters news, and importantly, allow you the chance to have candid discussions, of course, that involve you directly. And that is later on the lifestyle segment. But equally, also we take a look at the political situation right here in the country, the current affairs, what has been taking center stage, and we also take that comprehensive look on the conversation session that is on the second segment of current affairs. Thank you so much for keeping it TV47, and welcome on board as we kickstart the day. As always, I have so much in store for you. We'll also be taking a look at the newspapers as we proceed. So karibu once again, importantly, that you are part of this conversation. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela at TV47KA. I'll be rolling down the numbers at that point of the discussion where you can call us live and weigh in your sentiments on the same. So once again, like I said, so much happening in the world of politics, so much happening in the world of dealing with graft right here in the country, and lots of reactions in regards to the KEMSA scandal, or in regards to the COVID-19 scandal that is still ongoing, and talks that there is need to be proper, there is need for proper, investigation to be conducted, so that moving forward we get answers to this even as we saw what happened in Somalia upon that implication of one of the key leaders who was involved on matters graft of COVID-19 funds. So we'll be discussing that, and we take a look at how different their approach is in comparison to ours. Karibu sana, and let's kickstart as 7 people have been killed and 14 others sustained serious injuries after a road crash involving a lorry carrying gravel and a matatu at Kaburengu Market along Eldoret to Webuye Highway in Kakamega County. Mike Wagongo was there and gives us the details.
Eyewitnesses say the lorry was transporting gravel before ramming into a matatu and women who were selling their wares by the roadside near Kaburengu Trading Center.
Gari ikatoka huko juu imekatika brakes. Yes. Hiyo gari ikagonga kwanza Nissan huko hivyo. Ikagonga Nissan ikaingia kwanza huko ndani. Ikakuja ikaua watu, ikakuja ikafanya ikamalizia kwa Nissan nyingine hapa hivi.
Gari limetoka juu likiwa limebeba kokoto, likakosa brake, likagonga wamama ambao wanauza soko na gari mbili za Nissan. Na hawa mama wanapogongwa ni kwa sababu walikuwa wamekuja kutafuta kitoweo cha watoto. Na maajabu ni kwamba barabara hii imepita kwa shamba la wamama wa soko.
Hapa mahali wamama wanakufa. Pesa ilikuwa mali hapa ya kutengenezea wamama soko, lakini ameweka wamama kwa barabara. Wamama wanakufa, hawajajua wamama mali penye wanakaa. Sisi tumechoka wamama kufa kila siku hapa, hatengenezea wamama soko na wamama wakae ndani.
6 people died on the spot while another succumbed to injuries on the way to hospital.
Na ni bahati mbaya kwamba imeweza kuwaumiza wananchi 7 ambao kwa bahati mbaya wamepoteza maisha, na watu kadhaa ambao wameumizwa, karibu watu 14 ambao wamekimbizwa Webuye hospital wakiwa na majeraha.
Kakamega Deputy Police Commander James Ngetich, while confirming the incident, called on the drivers to be cautious while approaching the center, which has become a hotspot.
Lori ilipoteza mwelekeo ikiwa inateremka katika hiyo mteremko ya Chimoi, na ndiposa ikaanza kuwa wale watu walikuwa kando ya barabara. Wengi wao ni wamama ambao ni wachuuzi, walikuwa wanauza bidhaa kando ya barabara. Hii biashara ya kando ya barabara saa zingine iko na madhara, na ingekuwa mzuri kama wangeweza kuuzia bidhaa zao kwenye soko ili kupunguza ajali katika barabara kuu, ambayo hii barabara ni barabara ambayo iko na magari mingi sana.
Chevaiwa Location Chief Alex Koricho has urged traders to desist from conducting their activities on the roadside, and also called on Kakamega and national governments to relocate them so as to avoid similar casualties in the future.
National government na county government tushirikiane, because Kakamega mlikuwa na sehemu yao ya kuhusia matunda na mboka, na hiyo sehemu ilichukuliwa na Kenya hakuchenga hii parapara na onelea. Ingelikuwa vizuri
serikali kama nisa kutenga pesa tunue sehemu yenye mama atakuwa na usia vitu yao na pota na manamba kusimama. Hiyo inasuka kuchambo mzuri.
The injured are undergoing treatment at Webuye Referral Hospital as bodies of dead were taken to Webuye Hospital mortuary. Reporting for TV47 from Webuye, Bungoma County, I'm Mike Kagwako.
And still on accidents that happened yesterday, 2 people died on the spot, while 16 others, including an unnamed nephew of Mombasa Governor Ali Hassan Joho, sustained serious injuries in 2 separate accidents that occurred at Shauri Moyo area along Kilifi-Mombasa Highway. Now, the first accident involved a Toyota Land Cruiser V8 vehicle that had Joho's relative, which collided head-on with a canter. Witnesses said that Joho's nephew, who was responding to his sister after learning of the first accident, also collided head-on with a matatu not far from the scene. Ambulances from the Kilifi County Government and Mombasa Cement Company responded quickly and rushed those injured to Kilifi Hospital. Kilifi Health CEC Charles Dadu confirmed that 2 of the victims had succumbed, including a mother who was traveling in the matatu to Mtwapa.
Kati ya vile tuasikitika kusema 2 wamepoteza maisha yao, ikiwa mmoja ni mwanamume, mmoja ni mwanamke. Na huyu mwanamke alikuwa na mtoto wa chini ya miaka 10 ambaye yeye yuko hai na yuko katika hali bora, lakini bado tunaendelea kutafuta binamu wao. Kati ya wale wagonjwa 3 mahututi, mmoja amesafirishwa kwa njia ya ndege kupelekwa upande wa Mombasa. Kwa hivyo yule msimamizi mkubwa wa hospitali aliandamana na wale na pia wauguzi kumsafirisha yule mgonjwa kwenda Mombasa.
Now, ODM party leader Raila Odinga has called for a special audit of the country's COVID-19 funds, saying no one should be spared if found guilty of misappropriation of the funds. This happens as several lobby groups call for speedy investigations into the mismanagement of COVID-19 funds at KEMSA. Eli Lugova with the details.
After strong criticism from a section of leaders on ODM's stand on COVID-19, ODM party leader Raila Odinga seems to have changed the tune. In a statement to newsrooms, Raila Odinga urged the government to speed up investigations that will lead to prosecution of culprits instead of a political match shouting that creates more confusion. Raila further says ODM will not defend anyone, including members, relatives or friends found to have benefited from COVID-19 funds. Meanwhile, human rights activists in Nakuru engaged police in running battles as they held protests against alleged corruption, including the theft of supplies meant for the fight against COVID-19. The activists calling for proper investigations into the fraudulent deals at KEMSA.
As angry Kenyans, to actually demand the government to actually do a proper investigation and arrest those who are culpable. So we are here today as human rights defenders in Nakuru to actually tell the government that we are tired. Enough is enough. For how long will we run? For how long will we be afraid?
In a similar tone, the Justice for Every Child Campaign Kenya organization has strongly condemned the embezzlement of funds meant to help in the fight against COVID-19. The youth organization has called upon the government to expedite investigations and ensure all suspects are brought to book.
It is very sad indeed to note that there are people who are becoming rich amidst a pandemic that is making young people poor, that is making young people resort to crime, that is making young girls give up their virginity for pads, that is making mothers send out their daughters to become sexual workers. It is indeed sad that we can sit and watch as the government does things like this.
Eli Lugova, TV47.
Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman yesterday stated that the Ministry of Health's objective is to ensure that its response to matters of COVID-19 does not falter. Now, this will only happen if healthcare workers do not continue to down their tools. This comes when the country has an additional 193 COVID-19 positive cases, bringing the national tally to 32,557.
Health CAS Dr. Rashid Aman on Monday appealed to frontline workers through the Kenya Medical Association to call off their strike that kicked off 4 days ago in order for Kenyans to continue receiving health services during these dire times of COVID-19, adding that the strike will falter these services.
Ours is to appeal to our healthcare workers to be able to continue to render these important services at this critical time, but at the same time enter into dialogue on the grievances that they may have.
This comes even after the Nairobi Metropolitan Service NMS had 7 days to resolve grievances addressed by the health workers, among them being lack of medical covers and quarantine facilities for doctors and health workers in Nairobi County.
It's just basic them to give us a comprehensive medical cover, to promote the specialists who are working to pay the locum doctors, to ease the shortage of doctors and employ more doctors, give us an isolation space, and more importantly, give us an isolation space and redesignate and promote the specialists.
Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners Union KMPDU Thuranira Kaugiria alluded that if Monday's meeting held at City Hall led by NMS does not yield a solution to their grievances, the strike will be escalated effective Tuesday.
It's unfortunate that if that is not sorted out today, we shall be escalating the strike from tomorrow. We might possibly hit the streets. Hii ni mpaka mwisho. It's day 4 of many.
The COVID-19 national tally now stands at 32,557 cases, following an additional 193 positive cases. 225 recoveries have been discharged, as 6 more have succumbed to the virus.
Today, 193 people have tested positive, following the testing of 3,381 samples over the last 24 hours. This now brings the number of cumulative positives in the country to 32,557.
Nanok Lauren, TV47.
Now, the 12-member Senate committee tasked to resolve the revenue share stalemate is yet to agree on the best formula to share revenue 1 week after its formation. Senators from the counties that would gain from the third generation formula are now firmly behind the third basis on revenue share, thus the standoff. Liz Mutuku with the details.
The stalemate in the Senate continues, with the 12-member bipartisan committee failing to agree on a way forward. According to a source privy to the happenings in the committee, so far the Treasury has gone mute on a request by the committee for an extra 9 billion shillings from the Exchequer to cushion the losing counties. According to sources, Monday's meeting was adjourned for a moment, with senators from the counties that were gaining in the third basis for sharing revenue refused to budge, insisting on getting what they believe rightfully belongs to them. President Uhuru Kenyatta's remarks on revenue share is said to have fueled the disagreements between senators over the formula.
Hii formula si ilitolewa na wale watu wa SRC, si imeenda Senate kusema watu wagawe pesa kwa njia ya haki, kila mtu apate haki. Kwa nini mwananchi wa Nairobi ati kwa sababu inasemekana ati Nairobi ni mji tajiri, wewe ambao unaishi Embakasi na Korogosho bado unafunga choo kwa karatasi, lakini unaambiwa wewe ni tajiri, huna haki ya kupata pesa? Ukweli na haki utajitokeza.
Senate Majority Whip Irungu Kangata is now proposing that the committee invites the leadership of the House to try and hammer out an acceptable solution. Kangata says what is important is to get a solution rather than the speed of the process.
Vote no.
The Senate was expected to have a special sitting on Tuesday, but Speaker Kenneth Lusaka says that won't be happening until committee hands over a complete report. The Senate has met and failed to agree on the best formula for 9 towns as counties continue to suffer for lack of funds. Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47 Nairobi.
Kericho Governor Paul Chepkwony was put to task to explain the expenditure of 1.8 million shillings to a water project which never benefited the county, despite a relevant company being paid the full amount. Now, appearing before the Senate County Public Accounts Committee, Chepkwony was at pains to explain how tendering and procurement has been undertaken on several projects, with senators being suspicious of single sourcing.
Pre-qualification, the way you did it for this coffee roaster, or you have a list of pre-qualified suppliers, because this looks like a unique way of doing pre-qualification of supply, where you tell people bring your prices, and then I say, okay, blah blah blah, these 3 companies or 4 companies are able to supply, then now you give the tender adverts. That there is a pre-arranged exercise where you have 3 or 4 companies just to satisfy the requirements of Public Procurement Act of 2015, but then 2 of them are knocked at the technicalities. You know, Governor, for there to be value for money, it is important that all procurement matters are settled at finance level. If you realize that procurement matters are being settled at preliminary stage, it tells you there is a problem with the procurement department, because you find a situation where only one firm always ends up at the tail end of most of these questionable procurement. So can you assure this committee that 1, this is not by design, that 2, your procurement department maintains an updated list of pre-qualified suppliers who meet all the minimum requirements? Because, and you know why this is important, Chair, is because if you have pre-qualified suppliers who don't meet minimum requirements, then you end up with this situation where for everything that you procure, only one bidder is selected. So that's not a pre-qualification exercise. That's almost single sourcing, actually.
What is the level of duty of care for a geologist? I say that because I know of several instances where I've seen them saying there will be water, and then it happens there will be no water. And so at what point do you say, okay, he has done his bit, he has done his best, therefore he is not culpable? Or is it so perfect that once he says there is water, and then there is no water, he takes maybe some professional burden?
Be accurate to the dot. But the earlier machines acted on the basis of probability that water can possibly be here. At times they strike it, at times they miss it by a small margin or a big margin. So for all the boreholes that we've drilled upon using our new parameter, which is actually 8 million Kenya shillings plus, and I think the country has got only 2 of such, Kericho and National Water now. It is very accurate. We've never lost money since then. Every borehole we prospect, we strike water.
Now, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha has ruled out the possibility of reopening TVET institutions in the near future if the COVID-19 infection rate keeps rising. CS Magoha spoke while on a tour of the Kitale National Polytechnic, as Boniface Baraza now reports.
Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha says the government may be forced to allow only TVET students who are set to sit examination to report back to the college in the event that COVID-19 curve keep rising.
If there is measurable improvement and the behavior of the virus is reasonably stable, we may bite the bullet and allow the classes which are doing exams, for example, to come. But for TTCs, it is even more important because we intended to train the trainers, to allow the examination class to finish and go, and then train the trainers so that come May next year, we admit teachers who will be trained only on the CBC curriculum.
The Ministry of Education was contemplating reopening the institutions on 1st September, but the plan has been shelved despite calls from international bodies like UNICEF and WHO to have schools reopen to contain an upsurge of social vices meted in children.
The same WHO is double speaking because they have given us protocols which apply to everybody else. But they think because we are Africans, it is okay. We can ignore. Is somebody trying now to use us as guinea pigs or what? I think as far as we are concerned as government, we love our children. And it is in their interest that we are going to sit down again and to reevaluate every stage as we do every week, and then go to the stakeholders and come back to you.
Magoha challenged parents to take up the responsibility of instilling morals in their children in order to contain cases of teenage pregnancies that are on the rise since the closure of schools.
An issue of pregnancy, I think it's an issue which requires parents to start taking care. Why do you think it is going to school that will stop the pregnancy? Because the teachers are in control in school, isn't it? It is true. What about at home? Has times changed? If your daughter dresses and goes out, you don't care. And in any case, we are the ones who must provide solutions to our problem.
Bonfas Barasa, TV47, Trans Nzoia County.
All right, it's now time that we cross over to the newspaper review segment. Edwin Kigoli, who's a youth leader, joins me this morning so that we can all go through what is on the newspaper. We have the People Daily, as always, the Standard newspaper, and the Daily Nation. We start off with what is captured on the front page of the People Daily: weak and ineffective. The cast of Senate captured on page 4 extensively, and we're talking about the current constitution standing at 10. What is enshrined in the current constitution is one thing, or is a couple of things, or are a couple of things that we have not been able to achieve so far. The argument on ground has been that yes, we have one of the best constitutions, but we've not been able to implement even a quarter of it. So, as captured on page 4 of the People Daily, we are taking a look at the events that played out in Naivasha and where the ineffectiveness comes in, even as we talk of a weak Senate that was born out of this Katiba, or out of this constitution that we hold today. And leaders conspired in Naivasha to weaken the Senate, not knowing some will be elected as senators. And as it stands, I remember for the longest of time, even on the conversation of BBI, there's been talk that maybe we needed to strengthen the Senate as it stands. Crossing over to Kegoli, I'd love to hear his take on the same, even as we take a look at the stalemate that has been ongoing right now as to the question of revenue balance. Kegoli, can you hear me?
So it is quite unfortunate where we are as a country with regards to the Senate stalemate that we are looking at. And this is, of course, inevitably going to affect service delivery at the counties. And, well, you look at the times we are in and the stalemate at hand, you empathize with county governments. And I've always said that lack of timelines will always sometimes hamper, decision making. Like when we have matters that are open-ended and are so critical, it becomes difficult to even mount pressure on the agency handling the matter to deliver these items in due time. Because if this matter had a timeline, that after this time, whether or not senators pronounced itself on it, it should be transmitted to the National Assembly. The Senate could have rushed in to adopt a resolution so that they just don't look like they were unable to do anything or to have a stamp on this, very important matter. And this brings us to perhaps think about moving forward. What is it that we should do? Move forward. What do we need to do as a country to make sure that systems are very effective and and we are responsible in our decisions, so that, Kenyans do not have to suffer the disagreement of leaders like as we are witnessing. But again, what is happening right now is grandstanding, and the two factions, none of them is willing to sit ground, and maybe that is the greatest challenge we are facing with this stalemate. But if they are willing to, sit ground and say, let me drop my hardline and listen to what you're saying, or let's adopt a formula that is going to, harmonize all these things. Like we look at, whatever formulas that are being advanced. If the current amount that counties are receiving, can be maintained, then what more should we add to counties? Because what we need to think about also is how do we add more resources to county government? So we could retain the old formula with the old money, and then the additional cash hubs implemented with this new formula, and we see how it will work out. But again, if none of the sides is willing to sit ground, we will still, Thursday will come, it will go. They will not agree on anything.
All right, later on we expand some more on your take, or technically what the 2010 Constitution has been able to achieve for us, what needs to be amended, what needs not to be amended, and whether we should proceed and have the same, or whether indeed time is right for us to have a constitutional change or go for a referendum, or if at all we're making amendments, must it take us to that process of a referendum? All these amendments can be attained at the level of the House, as captured right there on page 7. Like I said earlier on, different leaders weigh in their sentiments on their take on the current constitution. Let's not delve deep into that, but cross over back to page 1 of the People Daily and see, or the front page, that is, see what has been captured. EACC KEMSA scandal will shock Kenyans. I do not know why they say it will shock Kenyans, but reality is that as it is, Kenyans are already shocked. But again, something that we probably all expected, or most of the people, looked at the scenario of COVID-19 and predicted that there are likelihoods that this is where we're going to land. So Raila takes on a Ruto for accusing ODM of complicity in COVID-19 corruption allegations. It says that special audit was the best way to tackle graft claims at Medical Supplies Agency. This has been captured equally on page 7. And as you can see, it's been a push and pull, even the civil society coming out there, and a picture painted of the civil society members who are demonstrating against these COVID-19 stealing, or that is COVID-19 funds stealing that has taken center stage in the country. Still not a clear picture, but as it is, reality is that money has been lost. What do you make of this?
This is the saddest thing we are hearing right now, because we've been with corruption ever since independence, and it is saddening that no substantial action has been taken. And I've always argued for this thing. You see, if again there is no timeline in the fight against corruption, it defeats the very own purpose. Because, we've seen piles of cases taken to courts of law, for hearing and determination. But they are mentioned, a date is fixed, a date comes, a date passes, no hearing, no whatever, except for that of Waluke and Wahungu that was so rushed. I don't know if it sets a very good precedent. But again, this is quite unfortunate, because look at the amount of money that donors are threatening to pull out. 400+ billion. That is quite a substantial amount of money. If KEMSA was so prudent enough, that money would just take this country somewhere forward with respect to the pandemic we are having. Because why must we steal even that which is supposed to save life? That means we have wolves within us that want to take away anything and everything that is meant for the common mwananchi, because here the person who is going to suffer the most is the common mwananchi. These people who depend nearly on everything from government. But those, tasked to fight corruption, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're doing enough. I don't know if they are overwhelmed. I don't know what. I really don't know what to say about this, because this thing has become a scourge, has become a pandemic in itself, and I don't know what the president is thinking. I don't know what he's thinking, because right now we should have seen some serious action being taken. But just asking somebody to step aside is not good enough. It's not good enough. Maybe we need to relook at how we handle corruption. But again, if there is no goodwill in the fight against corruption, then what we are doing is just hogwash. We will ask government to fight corruption, but maybe government is not ready to fight corruption. Maybe they want to fight corruption, but they can't fight corruption. But again, the question is, why can't they fight corruption when we have agencies in place that should be doing that? This thing is just bad enough, because look at the number of unemployment that we have in this country. Look at how our economy is right now. Should we be talking about stealing of public resources? That should not be the subject matter at this point in time. Let these corruption mongers spare this country a bit. They will eat this country until there is nothing left to eat, and the worst can just happen. When people are threatened to the wall, to the brink, you see what has happened in Mali. It tells you about something, because those citizens were, they were lamenting about corruption, poor governance, and they were just pushed to the brink. And perhaps what I would think is, building infrastructure, making sure these things are in place is not enough legacy. Handle those salient features that would derail your legacy. And I would tell His Excellency the President that if you fight corruption effectively, that would be a lasting legacy that Kenyans will always remember you for. But as long as corruption is still tainting the agenda of your government, however much infrastructure you do, people will always associate it with corruption, and people will say, yes, much infrastructure, but at what cost? People will always think there has been a lot of stealing in this infrastructure. So the goodwill even from citizens will be very, very minimal. So it is very sad. It is disheartening. It is just heartbreaking to think about these things. Looking at the state of our hospitals, look at our hospitals right now. Look at our testing capacity. The Minister of Health has come out to say we are seeing reduced number of cases because the testing reagents have run out of stock. And the question is, if that is the case, then what is it that we need to do? So we need to be very, very proactive as a country. Maybe the problem is us citizens. It is not government, because we are not bold enough to step up to the plate and ask government to account for what they do, because our politicians have boxed us into a corner and cocoon that they can easily control us. They will easily start ethnic rhetoric, and then what Edwin says will be seen as Luya, what somebody else will be seen as blah, 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 such stuff. So maybe the fault is we citizens. When we are given a chance to determine the type of leaders that will lead us, we degenerate into what is it that I'm going to get than what is it that this leader is able to give. So if we are able to address that question of, can this leader serve us effectively? Can this leader deliver on his or her mandate? And then that will be making progress. But unless that is done, if we keep electing leaders just because they've come with 50 shillings, 100 shillings they've given us, they've come beating ethnic drums, and we voted them because they are our ethnic kinsmen, and then we are getting it all wrong, and the fight against corruption will never be achieved. Lastly, on that one, and I want to squarely blame us citizens. It is our collective failure to make hard choices that we find ourselves in this very ugly situation. We have deliberately refused to support and help our government to be very accountable. Given a chance right now, I do not know if we'll make the right choice. Given a chance right now, I do not know if we'll get the best leaders in place. So it is up to us to determine What is it that we need our children to enjoy as a future? Do we want to pass on a future that is so corrupt, that is so unequal, that I'm almost certain that my kid, because they are coming from a particular area, their chances of succeeding are almost close to zero. So until we realize that it is up to us to determine the next course of action of this country, we will continue to say the judiciary is not delivering on justice, the investigative agencies are not doing their job, the president is not responding, and such stuff. So let us get our politics right.
Well, extensively expressed right there. We'll also be taking a look at it more later on in regards to the reaction of different leaders of the same and whether indeed their reactions are genuine towards achieving a solution to it. Aside from that, and still on matters as revenue share stalemate, and now Treasury wants members of Parliament to be recalled to approve cash for counties. That is expounded on page 2. Treasury wants Parliament to approve money to counties. 12-member committee established, and we wait to see what it is that the 12-member committee will proceed to give us. But in the interim, we are proposing that counties be allowed access to 50% of the 316 billion that is being debated on as the Senate resolves the stalemate. This is according to the CS for Matters Treasury, Ukur Yatani. This even as talks of the panel are set to solve the impasse that hits headwinds. So we'll be expounding more, and we'll get to see whether indeed that is going to come in handy towards creating a solution on the revenue share stalemate as it stands. So I don't think we need to expound some more on that, because we've already touched on it in regards to, the stalemate that we still witness at the level of the Senate. And that aside, nightmare for workers hoping to strike gold in Qatar. And this is a story that is captured on the front page and extensively expounded on page 6 of the People Daily. And this is literally not news. This is something that is a reality on ground. Human Rights Watch released a report about the torrid conditions and violations foreigners are exposed to in the Middle East. But still, we see our youths, Kegoli, in dire need of crossing over to other sides in search of greener pastures. Reality is that, the grass is not always as greener as, majority of them expect on the other side.
You see, if they had a better option, they would not opt for that. So many of them are pushed to that brink of, do I have any other option left? And they're like, yes, we've had bad stories about these Arabic countries, Qatar, and what have you. So they are like, what is it else that we can do? The situation is not good at home. So can we find anywhere? As long as I'm somewhere, I can deal with the bad that comes with it. So it's quite unfortunate. And, at this particular point in time, some people still finding pleasure in violating other people's human rights. It's just unthinkable to imagine. It's just bad enough, because what reward will you get when you violate somebody's human right, unless you're a terrorist, or something close to that. But again, this calls for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs perhaps to open, diplomatic talks with these said countries, so that we have some safeguards and strict lines that needs to be followed when citizens are in those countries. Let them be given a humane treatment, because they are offering their selfless service over there. They're going to make ends meet for themselves and their families. So let them be given a fair treatment, because we also have members of those countries in our country, and we don't treat them bad. We are very good to them. We are very welcoming to them. So I do not understand why they should be giving our citizens such inhumane treatment as if they are lesser human beings. It's not right before God and before man, and even considering the Bible, considering the Quran. It's not good. It's not right. It just defeats the purpose. So maybe the Ministry of Foreign Affairs can enter into that. But sometimes our ministries let us down a big deal. They do let us down, because when such things happen, they need to be on top of the game. They need to step up and, inquire as to what is really happening, what is causing these things. Can there be a remedy towards, finding a solution for these things, so that, our citizens feel safe to be outside the country. They feel like, they've gone to find something for them, because when they come, they pay taxes. So it's also a win-win situation for them and government. So maybe government needs to do a little bit more.
Hope that things are going to get better, and also the conversation of making our countries much better, so we do not push our youths, our young techs, or most of the people wanting to go out there to the rest of the world in search of greener pastures. Hope as resumption of sports signals a return to normalcy. This has been captured on page 8. I think that's some sigh of relief or good news for numerous sportsmen and women, and equally, the country at large. Just a polite way of trying to say that, yes, resumption of usual activities coming on board slowly, but importantly, that call that we abide by the guidelines that are set by Ministry of Health to deal with COVID-19. This even as the country stands at 32,557 confirmed COVID-19 cases. That is as of yesterday's address, and we'll be following up on more to get to know whether there are changes today, whether there's more or whether there's less as it stands. Before we expound some more on what has been captured. Actually, there was this accident, that killed 7 people and injured 14. And it looks like, again, slowly by slowly, the issues of accidents are crippling in. It looks like people are getting a little bit more careless on the roads as opposed to, what is supposed to be. And the clarion call has always been, for road users, make sure that you are careful. Let's drop that one and cross over to a different newspaper, Kegoli. I know there's much that we can say about the same, but we can only be asked or we can only ensure that we are vigilant and we are careful on the road. The Standard newspaper front page, Kenya's top generals promise to Kenyans. A man whose typical day revolves around prayer, fitness, and office work. That is General Kibochi fell in love with the military in Nyeri High School when he encountered KDF personnel in the area. Read the story, of course, has been captured on page 2. I don't think we need to expound more on that. But on the front page of the Standard newspaper, Raila's firm demand on funds probe. I think we have also touched on the same. And question of blood and treatment of COVID-19. Still, we witness discrepancies. Still, we witness differences. Still, we do not get a clear report on matters COVID-19. Do you suppose this is just the scenario in the country, or it is a global problem where it is not a clear picture on matters COVID-19? And what does it speak about the scenario in Tanzania and this direction that Magufuli decided to take in comparison to what the rest of the world has decided to do?
President Magufuli got tired of this thing when it came. So for Tanzania, it's really hard to tell what is really happening there, because I think anybody who loves themselves too much would not want to go there, because we do not know the actual state of COVID-19. We do not, get reports of like how many people are being hospitalized. Like, have we seen a surge in the number of people going to seek medical attention that would, warrant, like, why is this a lot more right now than it was, so that we can use it to deduce, like, perhaps there is a proper cover-up on COVID-19. This pandemic, you can't really cover it too much, because sometimes it can overwhelm somebody and they must seek medical attention, and it would come out clearly with the number of people going to seek medical attention. So Tanzanians or Tanzania authorities are not giving out these statistics or data or information, so it's hard to tell. But again, I think some countries have not been reporting the actual state of affairs, save for United States of America, and maybe Britain and such countries. But some countries do not report the actual state of affairs because maybe due to reduced testing capacity or just reluctance to share, information concerning the infection rate, and some countries just refusing to share details. So it becomes hard to really tell to what extent is this pandemic hitting a particular country. And this pandemic has brought countries to a standstill. Look at the global economy, and you look at the kind of recession that the world is plunged in. This was not an economic crisis, but a medical crisis that impacted negatively on the economy. So maybe with the grace of God and with the working of our economists, we can do a recovery plan and make progress with it. Because look, President Kenyatta was there in 2008 when the country was in another recession, and he developed a stimulus package that economists would argue worked out. And President Kenyatta again is found in a case where he's having an almost similar situation, and he developed a stimulus plan that is supposed to jumpstart the economy of this country. But again, what we need to do is support the president. Let us rally together, behind his agenda, and also share with him what we think and feel should be happening in the wake of making our country move forward. Because when we come together as citizens, really greater things can happen. And what we also need to do is, right now, you see, we are having the strike of some medical staff, going on strike, which is counterproductive with respect to the pandemic at hand. So, if the medical practitioners are not in hospitals, it becomes practically difficult to handle these patients seeking medical attention. So what maybe we can do is rally behind the government's agenda, because it is our government. There's nothing we can do about it right now. We need to just support it. And when we will be asked, what did you do when your government was limping? Did you help it stand strong, or you crippled it even further? I would want us to say we did all we could to support our government. We did all that was to our ability to help the president achieve his agenda, so that nobody will say I was, bankrolled by unsupportive citizens. Because, when I talk about young people in this country, they are always ready and willing to bring forward ideas and activities that would help move forward the agenda of this country. But the question is, are they being heard? Are they being seen? Are they being given that platform to really demonstrate their ability? Because if you want to know whether you are a good player or not, then you must have a football field where you can train and perform, so that you're able to tell, I can do this, I can do that. But if you do not have that, you just remain good in thoughts, but in practice, you don't know, because you don't have that capacity. So let us rally together and support the government's agenda. Let us tell government the truth. If we feel government is underpunching, let us tell it. If we feel government is not doing enough to fight corruption, let us tell it. Because supporting government doesn't mean unlocking our mind or locking our minds to the realities that are happening. Let us tell the president we are not satisfied with the way your government or administration is handling corruption. Let us be very honest, because the president advocates for honesty. Let us come out and share our thoughts and minds with him.
On the front page of the Standard newspaper, most of the stories we've captured is rule for the jungle in Masai Mara spectacle as 300 wildebeest drown. Quite an unfortunate report that is also captured on the front page of the Daily Nation, and 300 wildebeest drown as, of course, annual Mara crossing spectacle goes awry as animals trample each other in stampede. That has been captured on page 2. This is pretty much unfortunate, but all the same, yes, the report is right there. Plot to steal cash, how head teachers fudged the numbers in bid to rob state of school cash. It's pretty much unfortunate, the scenario in our schools today. This also is a story that has been captured on the People Daily, and also expounding on how much teachers have been threatened to a point whereby they want to, come out of NAT, or they want to, seize membership of being NAT members, courtesy of the stalemate that has been witnessed amongst the teachers, yes, or amongst the union and the Teacher Service Commission. So speaking on matters education at large, and also on a story that we had touched on, CS Magoha says that we will not have TVET back. So briefly, in about a minute or so, what do you make of the situation on matters education? Remember, all this is happening at that point where we were trying to transition from one system of learning to another, that is the competence-based curriculum.
We are faced with a very unique situation here. And not many parents, as I've always said, would want to risk their school-going children, whether in universities, TVETs, colleges, or secondary or primary schools, or whichever level. So it is a really delicate balance for us, for parents, for the stakeholders. So it is a difficult situation for us as a country. So, but again, you see, this pandemic looks like it's here to stay for some time. So we cannot say we will hold school-going kids at home for all that while. We must develop plans. We must bite the bullet. Sometimes when you fear too much, you tend to lose somehow a lot more. So maybe we need to find, can we deal with this virus? Can we, do gradual reopening? Let's start with the highest learning institutions. But we've had their administration come out and say they are not ready, to hold students. Again, why are they not ready? Have they tried something that has not worked? Then they're just saying we are not ready when they have not tried anything, you see. So we must also, be very courageous and bold. Sometimes this also is a measure of leadership. Are you just a leader in good times, and in bad times you fear too much and you can't take risks? So, because university students, for example, these are young adults. These are people they are adults. These are people who can take care of themselves. So we could do a start with them and see what will happen, so that we are able to tell, yes, after this, we can go to other institutions. So we do a gradual reopening. But I do not really fancy a situation where we just let our kids stay at home for as long as this pandemic lasts, because you even don't know what is happening to our candidates, Maybe they are really disturbed, but again, that is just it, and we have to accept that the situation is not so good, and find ways on how school administration can be supported to ensure they reopen. But again, they also need to be given some allocations that can help them, make decisions.
Okay. Kigoli, thank you so much for the insights. Still so much that has been captured on the papers. You can always grab a copy and get to know more. On that note, we cross over to the next segment after this break. and welcome back. It is time for that segment where we discuss the issues that are of importance to you. And yes, it is on the current affairs. We take a look at a couple of issues that are, like I said, of importance and have been making headlines all through. So welcome on board once again. And of course, we have two gentlemen who are going to be joining me this morning. They are the panelists of the day. Kamau Gatwichi, who's a governance expert, and we equally have Steve Kijana, who's always been household analyst, I'd have to say, right here on TV47's Morning Cafe show. And of course, I'm sure they're well versed in discussing these issues. More of them are a little bit political, but equally more of current affairs and, pertaining to, good governance right here in the country. So, gentlemen, hamjambo.
Jambo and good morning.
Good morning. Good to have you.
Thank you. No, we are glad to be here.
All right. Glad to have you too.
Yeah.
All right, so straight to it. I think I need us to capture like about 3-4 issues within this period that we have. Key of them being the 2010 Constitution. 10 years into it. And after these 10 years, we are having conversations of probably amending whatever it is that we have, or making some changes, or even bad incorporating and bringing on board a different constitution that will address different issues. As it stands, are we going to be doing justice to the 2010 Constitution if we are to scrap it off today? Is time ripe for us to make constitutional changes, gentlemen? Any of you can start. None of you wants to start. All right.
We are 10 years into the new Constitution of 2010, and to be able to look at it well, we have to go back to where did it start and why was it brought in. Number one, the main objective of this constitution was to control the kind of powers that the executive really had. You understand that the presidency, especially, and the executive had a lot of powers that needed to be kind of controlled and reduced. So that was the first objective. The other objective was to kind of, give more rights to the people. And you understand that there is a great win that you have seen the likes of Okiya Omtata, public interest litigants. He's not even a lawyer. Article 22 and I think Article 258 gives him a right to go and petition to the court in public interest. So this Katiba removed power from the government and the executive and gave it to the people. Nowadays, there is the issue of public participation that we must say is a great win. If you look at it nowadays, there is no law, no policy, no budget that can be passed by parliament or by the executive without the input of the public through public participation processes. So it is a great win for this constitution that it has given a lot of power and, role in governance to the people. And I've always said that governance, or rather democracy, is not just about the people going and voting. Democracy is just about the people taking a role in the decision-making of the country. And I think that is one great win. However, we must say that we've encountered a lot of challenges. And we have had governments that are not ready. Governments that are not ready to adhere to the constitution, governments that are not ready to watch the people enjoy such amount of rights. You heard the president some day in his address saying that the rights that we enjoy are too expensive and they are given by this constitution. He feels that he has been drained a lot of power. You've seen the president even speak with a lot of disappointment that he would want to do something, but he can't because his hands are tied, which I think is a good thing because presidents were all out, holding people without probably taking them to court. But I must mention one very important thing that was mentioned in the TJRC report of 2013. The TJRC report recommended various changes. And some of the things that you're watching right now, some like the economic crimes that you're watching right now, that we're even speaking about right now, were things that the TJRC recommended. And other bodies have recommended that should have been really amended. So this constitution, although it was good, it was not complete. We have issues like the EACC. If you look at Article 79 that speaks about the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, it has only one line, that Parliament shall enact legislation. The EACC, the TJRC recommended that more substance need to be put there to control how the EACC should operate, to give it prosecutorial powers. So it was good, but more changes, like they said then, needed to be done to make it fully complete.
Gatswechi, have we done justice for this constitution? Is it fair to talk of constitutional change at this time when many argue that we've not even implemented a quarter of what is enshrined in it?
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and you will appreciate that the only constant thing in life is change.
Yeah.
Every other time you move around, people are seeking to change, people are seeking to make themselves better. And what you will agree with me is that whilst there are so many things that we agree on in this particular constitution, there are those that appear to have a departure from the aspirations of Kenyans. However, the only unfortunate thing is that most of our politicians are not gesturing to actually change the constitution to actually aid or make it convenient for Mwananchi to achieve his aspirations, but rather they are doing it for selfish gains. And I would say this, knowing that part of what we are actually experiencing today, the level of corruption, we thought that that would have been addressed by our constitution as it is. At the point when we are bringing on board this particular constitution across the world, just around the promulgation time, it was said to be one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. And we thought that having given the different arms of government power, like legislature and the judiciary, we thought that the judiciary would have taken it upon itself to actually make sure that when people are actually brought before them with matters corruption, that they will judiciously and expeditiously handle the issue, so that at the end of the day, we see justice, and it makes it very expensive and painfully so for anyone to actually engage in corruption. Unfortunately, the constitution has been very progressive, but what we are seeing now is that constitution is only as good as the people around it. So if we do not have goodwill around the people who are meant to implement it, then the old constitution and the new constitution does not bring anything to smile about other than the devolution, the creation of many offices. We now have local waheshimiwas in our counties here. We have our local bunge. Yes, we are able to address some and most of the challenges that affect us, but then we still see that the constitution has actually created a number of loopholes for people to actually steal from us.
The president himself acknowledges the importance of change of the constitution, and we all have seen the momentum that has been gained across the country on Talking Matters BBI, the probabilities of us going for a referendum. That certainly is change of a constitution. Just how much then can we do towards ensuring that we do not repeat the same mistakes that we have done with the current constitution, starting from the time of inception, where most of the Kenyans did not take time to go through the document? They all, some of them said that, Baba has already done that, so we probably do not need to proceed and do that. What are the likelihoods that in the event that it's going to be the BBI, then Kenyans are going to be out there to understand what is put inside there and whether it's in the interest of them?
Well, I must say that BBI, as it is at the moment, it doesn't really seem to address the real issues that the constitution was supposed to address. I think, as Kamau Gatswechi is saying, some of the changes that are being tabled are changes that are meant to really take into consideration certain interests of certain interest groups, such as those who want an expanded executive and issues of, bringing unity in the government. But there are key issues, as I told you, that have been identified by task forces and commissions like the TJRC. We have issues like the issues of affirmative action, which need to be taken into consideration once and for all. We need to really come together and say, can we really afford the 2-thirds gender rule in Parliament specifically, or do we just confine this issue of 2-thirds gender rule to appointive positions? And we need to address so many issues. The issues of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. we need to look at that issue as a very serious issue, because we lose a lot of billions. Almost a third of the budget is wasted and through pilferage and other issues of corruption. We need to look at such specific issues. However, since you've had the conversation, you've never heard about those very serious issues. You've never heard about issues of looking at the third schedule, which shows the division of roles between the national government and the county government and how we can make it more efficient. We've not seen a very, very serious conversation about devolving more funds to the counties so that we can have more development go to Mwananchi. We've not seen an issue, something about how we can establish audit systems at county level that are very strict to ensure that money is not lost. Because you had the other day a Mandera MCA saying that even the amount of money they get, almost most of it is lost to corruption. So we need to see such specific issues that is going to help Mwananchi gain maximum lift from this constitution. But what we are seeing is a conversation where, you know, the people are not really involved. If you looked at the BBI conversations at the counties, it was just a selected few who are being taken to hotels to discuss whatever was already brought to them. So I think this conversation, the BBI conversation, I have no much hope that it's going to address specific issues, but it is only going to address what the initiators really wanted, which is more of an expanded executive and, you know, I doubt even the issues of electoral justice, which have been a victim of others, will probably be addressed in this BBI.
Does the common Mwananchi have the power, Gatwechi, then, to go through the document and determine whether indeed this is of his or her interest or not? And I mean, is it a polite way of saying that, you know, from the tone of Steve, are there likelihoods that, you know, this is going to be forced down the throat of Kenyans, and probably Kenyans will probably not have a say as to it, regardless of what has been incorporated in the document?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. You asked a very good question as regards the role of Mwananchi. And I also like what Steve just said about the unfortunate aspect of government trying to force us to actually accept its already crafted solution for us. However, on the question of Mwananchi, I think Mwananchi needs to bring on board some quality engagement in terms of governance. And the quality engagement in terms of governance really starts at the point where you weigh and decide who is actually going to be your leader. We've seen that a lot rises and falls with the quality of leadership that we have, both at the county assembly and at the National Assembly together with the Senate. So every other 5 years, when Mwananchi gets an opportunity to actually make a conscious decision under zero coercion, they actually need to arrive at a situation whereby they are able to pick the very best to actually represent them. But having said that, Mwananchi again does not have the luxury of time to evaluate every other person who presents themselves for elective position. And what does that leave us with? We would wish to see some honest and sincere opinion leaders in every other party. People who actually take it upon themselves to actually say and weigh the people who front themselves for positions of leadership. We do not want to only see like the religious leaders only show up on TV when there's something that they are going to be given by a political aspirant. We want them to actually come together, like say in a county like say Embu or Meru, they come together and say, you know what, we are going to give a direction as to whom we think actually fits the bill to represent the people. Because again, do you think my mother in the village would be able to actually weigh and say whether Steve Kijana is able to meet the bill? Yes, they could, based on the activities done in the village. But there are those things that are done over and beyond your locality, you know, and those are the things that should actually be able to offer metrics to define whether you actually fit the bill. So as to whether Mwananchi has a role, yes, the role is there, but then Mwananchi also needs to be guided as to how they're actually going to execute that mandate.
And speaking of which, I want to ask this question. One of the key issues that has been faulted or has been looked at as an undoing of the current constitution is the fact that it did not award so much power to the Senate. And in the recent conversations of change of the constitution, there's been that conversation as to whether indeed the Senate should get more powers. Looking at what has taken center stage and the issues that have been presented before the Senate to address, the current one that we're talking about, the revenue share stalemate, do you suppose then that there is that need indeed to strengthen the Senate so that moving forward we can have devolution protected?
From where I sit, I would say that we do not necessarily need to strengthen whatever arm of government that we already have. We are happy with the provisions as they are in our constitution. All we are craving for is honest and just leadership. This idea of politicians recoiling and going back to their backyards, not thinking with their minds, but rather with their community and their future political aspirations being what appears to be a yardstick for what they actually decide to deliberate on or make decisions on is very unfortunate. So for me, I do not envisage any situation of trying to give people more powers. Look at it today. Is it true that the Senate cannot make a decision that will sit pretty and make every other Kenyan happy? The answer is no. These people have the capacity, even with the current legislation, the current powers that they have in our constitution. They are able to do that. But the grandstanding we are actually witnessing is not informed by the lack or the presence of power within the legislation as it is now. So what I would say is we just need to have honest leadership, honest engagement at the different levels of governance. And more to it, we would like to see the party leaders being able to crack the whip. And this is what we said. Remember, these parties, Linda, are actually funded by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So it is in the interest of the taxpayers that we want to see service delivery. Remember, when they delay disbursement of cash, like say what is happening now, to the counties, where will Mwananchi get services from? I mean, for the last 2 months, remember, there are some essential medication that the counties need to provide, like say for diabetes. They are not getting that now. When, I mean, the patient's health is actually deteriorating, and before you know it, most of them will now be coming back with saying, you know, we have a kidney failure, courtesy of diabetes, which would have been managed earlier.
And that clearly paints a picture of how devastating, things are at the level of the counties. And speaking of how best we can protect devolution, it's obvious and evident that indeed devolution is at stake. But reality is that even if we are to talk matters change of governance, a change of the constitution, the likelihoods of devolution being maintained are high, and many have argued that devolution was the best thing that could ever happen to us. But it looks like there's not so much justice that has been channeled towards, us successfully attaining the fruits of devolution. So, Steve, at some point in time, you've had the interest of being senator. You still have the interest of, getting into the governance aspect. Do you suppose then that there are better ways we can incorporate changes on the constitution and ensure that we strengthen, the devolution for that matter?
Well, first of all, I think it has been a great justice to the people of Kenya to bring devolution, and which is more of bringing more power to the people. If you look at the objects of devolution, I think the main one was to bring leadership and government closer to the people, because nowadays with public participation, people can now converse with their county governments and they can present their specific challenges and specific developmental problems to the county government, which is closer to them. However, we have seen a lot of challenges, and we need to ask ourselves one question. What if a national government or an executive will be elected that will not be supportive of devolution? Do they have the power to frustrate devolution? Yes. We've seen the Treasury has really, for long, has not been, doing very well in terms of disbursing the county funds. You've seen that the exchequer at the national level still has a lot of power in releasing some of those funds. You've seen even sometimes those funds, a certain amount of funds being released towards the end of the financial year, where they cannot really make use of those funds. You've seen that nowadays, we started at, I think, 20% of national revenue being disbursed to counties. But there has been a constant decrease which means if a county or if a government that does not really support devolution comes, they can even take the percentage that goes to counties of funds even lower. So I think what we need to do in the constitutional amendments is to ensure that we put up systems that are going to defend devolution. Number one, it is to increase more funds from about the 15% minimum to about 40%. We need about 40% of funds going to the mwananchi. As we have always said, revenue allocation should be based on functions. Therefore, looking at the fact that health and agriculture and very, very many serious functions are at the county level, then we need to see an amount of money that is going to the counties that is going to be able to look into those functions. Because the situation that we have nowadays is where most counties use about 60 to 70% of their allocation on recurrent expenditure. Only about 30% goes to development. And that is where you see even the marginalized counties are still marginalized because very little percentage of funds goes to development. So I think we need to put up systems that are going to defend devolution, regardless or rather regardless of the kind of executive that we are going to have elected in the next probably 100 years.
And the revenue stalemate, yes, as you come in, the revenue stalemate is still here. Now members of parliament being urged to come in or to step in so that they can solve the situation as it stands from the level of treasury. And this is a proposal by the Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani. As you weigh in on the previous question, what do you make of this and what are the likelihoods that indeed we are going to finally get an answer to the stalemate?
Well, the people challenging and looking at the current CRA recommendation should also be cognizant of the fact that we are now faced with the COVID-19 challenge, which the budget had not actually envisaged. I mean, these are rare moments, and some of the inclusions they want captured in this particular disbursement should actually wait because we don't even think we have the money. We are not generating the revenues that we did a couple of months or years ago. But having said that, I wanted to speak more on the benefits of devolution, some of which we've already seen, especially on equity. There's some beauty every other time when you read in the newspapers or watch on TV that in Mandera or Ajia that we had a cesarean section done within the county, something that had never been done for many years, that now they have a couple of kilometers in terms of tarmac within that area. So this is something that needs to actually be celebrated. There is also the aspect of inclusion as opposed to exclusion. People now feel much more part of the government. However, the flip side or the downside of the whole thing is this, is that we are not asking for intelligent management of resources. We have a lot of wastage. What you can see in most of the counties would be the leadership riding in very expensive cars. There is a lot of duplication in terms of roles. You see that we have roles that you would imagine would be left to the central government, but then you see the same being replicated by the county government. So wastage is still there, and there is poor role of mwananchi in trying to hold the county leadership to account, because we see the leadership here at the county level using tokenism to actually appease the locals. The people who shout the most, the people who appear to be more versed with the matters, governance and leadership, you will see a lot accrue to them by way of development and things like that. And the most unfortunate thing is that they, like the central government, continue to allocate much more resources to infrastructure as opposed to catalysts of development, like say agriculture or something that would make mwananchi leak a lot of resources like health. So you still see that we have people, persons moving from certain counties to seek for healthcare in some of the most developed cities, like say Nakuru, Nairobi, or Nyeri. So we've still not really benefited as much as we would have envisaged 7-8 years down the line.
But we still hold hope, right?
Absolutely.
All right. And now speaking of the stalemate that we witnessed today, if we are to get 50% awarded to the county so that they can, work out something as it stands right now, so that they can, of course, again, address the, stalled up projects, the stalled up activities. Most of the county officers arguing that they've not been paid for almost months here, a month or two or so. And again, we've also seen the doctors across different counties, including, of course, the city, downing their tools in regards to the same. We all know that health is a devolved unit, and it paints a bad picture of the scenario, especially at this point that we are dealing with COVID-19. So speaking of this, proposal by Ukur Yatani, and coming to you, Steve Kijana, do you suppose then that will come in handy towards addressing the stalemate, even as we focus to see whether indeed the 12-member committee is going to, give solutions as to, again, the stalemate that we are talking about?
Well, first of all, I really need to, I think it is a good move. And as I was saying, these constitutional amendments were supposed to really ensure that we protect the factor of devolution, so that even when such challenges come, devolution will not be threatened. And this is what we are now facing, because if such provision was provided for in the Constitution, weeks ago, this disbursement could already have been made. So I think giving counties 50% is going to be important, because if the revenue formula that will be passed, there is definitely no way it is going to have an influence on the 50% that will be disbursed. So I think it is going to be important, looking at the doctors and health worker strikes, and looking at the period that we are in. We are in a COVID-19 period where health is a very major issue. We are in a period where, the issue of agriculture, the issue of food is also a very important factor. So I think it is going to be a good move, and I think they should have done this like yesterday. And I have the CRH say that this provision has always been there. But these provisions, although they are there, they are not protected in the Constitution. And that is why I'm of the very major opinion that such provisions need to be put up well in the Constitution, so that they are going to guide how revenue is, or how funds are disbursed during such times, because you can have an executive that will even probably want to refuse to disburse those funds. We need a very strong Constitution that puts such issues into consideration for the future and for future governments.
All right, and as we cross over to a different scenario altogether, COVID-19 is indeed here with us and not ending anytime soon. And this is a conversation that I had yesterday, but it's still ongoing. It's only fair that we address it. This in regards to the scandals that emanate or are coming on board, or alleged scandals in, the health sector, and the latest on matters KEMSA. We still are not getting clear pictures. And the latest, Baba giving a proposal that this probably should be a situation that should be presented to the Auditor General's office, or maybe this we should get more information from the Auditor General's office so that we can proceed to, address the aspect of graft in regards to the same. Whilst many would argue that Baba is hypocritical in addressing this issue, Gatwechi, don't you suppose that that is the noble route to take if at all we are to deal with these issues? Because remember, at the level of the courts, the judiciary boss at some point in time has been quoted saying that it has become hard to deal with corruption in the country because there is no watertight evidence that is presented to them. So if we are to take this direction that is being proposed by ODM, don't you suppose then that probably it would be the right way towards fighting this and literally winning it?
Yeah, thank you. I think I must welcome the sobriety that I see in the ODM wing, especially in dealing with matters corruption. Remember, every other time you sensationalize corruption, you actually allow some of the very creative people to actually run away with it. And whilst we agree that corruption, like Joe Biden told us, is just another form of tyranny that is actually used by those in power to actually cripple the thoughts and minds of those who have zero access to it, I would say that it's important that besides what Honorable Odinga is actually proposing, that we have the Auditor General come in, that might be the honest thing to do at this particular time. However, in a government that continues to enjoy, tons and acres of newspaper headlines on corruption, I would pray that they come up with measures to actually avert corruption before it actually happens. Let's stop spending a lot of time calling on the DCI and the DPP to swing into action. This will not help Mwananchi at any point. You know, we need to come up with systems that will forestall corruption, systems that will prevent corruption from happening. Look at it now. How many cases of corruption do we have going on? Just yesterday I read that they're also again calling in on the Auditor General to look at the Tala operations in Turkana. Surely, these are very few officers. How many cases can they actually look into? Our courts look at the COVID situation. They are not even able to adjudicate over most of the cases that are brought before them. So whilst I agree that there is reason to actually believe in our institutions, like Honorable Odinga said, I also wish that those who have been implicated would actually be called to step aside. We are happy with those who left offices after it was mentioned, but then we want to see expeditious handling of this matter, because at the end of the day, it's not about them being prosecuted, it's about the monies going into rightful use, and those who are currently enjoying it should actually be brought to book. You can imagine every other time Kenyans see this happen, it actually eats into the innovation of the young generation. Every other person is now looking at an easy option, trying to steal. This is actually it's a serious cancer that will eat away all the innovation and creativity of the youth, because every other time people will be thinking about stealing from us.
All right, and coming to you, Steve, looking at, yes, Baba's reaction and the reaction of different leaders in what the DP says, the pretentious of course, former, so he says, opposition attempted defense of the COVID-19 graft licensee is not shocking. They have been accused of being hypocritical in this, while according to Gatwechi, this is a sober way of approaching the scenario that is at hand. It's not the first case of graft that is being alleged in the country. We still have others that are pending. What could have informed this, move of sobriety from ODM? Is it what many would argue that probably some of the key figures within there could be implicated on the same?
Well, I must say that I agree with Gatwechi that Raila's statement was very sober, and it had contents and directions that could really help us solve this current COVID-19 scandal and even future scandals. However, it was quite reactionary, considering that his party secretary general had given a totally, contrasting statement, which sounded like it was in support of the scandal. And in the statement, you could see him trying to defend the scandal, saying that the issue of cost and prices, were ranging due to the current issues of supply and demand. So if you looked at Sifuna's statement, it was quite hypocritical of a party that has always spoken very strongly against corruption. And so we know that we've had a few members of ODM being implicated in the scandal. I saw yesterday Purkomen telling a member from ODM that we are waiting for your arrest and prosecution. So I think, first of all, it is unfortunate that this conversation has gone into a conversation where a group is speaking against the other because they are not part of the eating process. You will see that the Tanga look bitter, probably because they are not part of it this time around. And the ODM initially looked to be celebratory because probably this time they are part of the eating process. So I think it is unfortunate that the fight against corruption by political stakeholders for long, it seems that they were not really fighting corruption as a vice in the country that need to be fought, but they were fighting because they were not part of the eating, and it is quite unfortunate. However, according to what Baba is proposing, I think having a serious audit process by the Auditor General would really help unearth the specific details about the regular or irregular process of procurement that was used during this period. So I have always had an issue with the kind of evidence that the DPP presents to court. The basis of every prosecution is evidence. And currently, what we are all speaking about in the media and in the political conversations is basically, at the moment, it is basically rumors. So what Raila proposes that a perfect and proper audit process should be done, that is going to give us evidence, technical evidence that can be presented in court. Because I agree with Maraga that unless you present solid evidence in court, then these corrupt people are always going to be acquitted. And I think it is a great challenge. If you looked at the Transparency International report, Somalia was rated 180 out of 180 of the countries that were really assessed in terms of governance. It is called a score of just 9 out of 100. But look at what it did, I think it was yesterday or I don't know, the day before.
Yes, it was yesterday, yes.
They jailed about 4 of government officers
officials,
who also ordered, including the director of health. The director of health is supposed to pay about 59 million Kenya shillings fine and also serve a prison term. So that is a move that shows that the fight against corruption there is on high gear. And I've always said that unless we prosecute and also we convict corruption suspects, then we are not going to be speaking so strongly against this corruption fight. We've seen the president speak so strongly. Everyone is speaking about it. But what are we doing about it? Are we seeing convictions? No. The big fish are rare to get convicted. We have not yet seen, convictions of about, serious jail terms of serious government officials. So I think the way forward is to have strong evidence and to convict. However, it is unfortunate for Mutahi Kagwe that he says he came in to rein in on the health cartels, but the health cartels look like they have been more empowered during his tenure. So I think something is amiss in the health ministry, and it should be looked into through serious evidence.
Getrechi, looking at Somalia's scenario and comparing the same to us, we ask this question. They probably registered the COVID-19 cases, probably right after us or maybe almost at the same time, the first cases. And as we speak today, already there are few who have been convicted. While this could be challenged in court, reality is that there is progress. I would want you, first of all, to tell us whether indeed you foresaw a scenario where there's going to be corruption based on the funds that have been channeled towards dealing with COVID-19, even before it came to take center stage. And also picking up on what the CEO of EACC, Twali Barak, says, that this is a big and a wide case that will take time to process. The case has very many angles, including financial procurement. I mean, would you say that we did not foresee this as a country?
I mean, Linda, even in my wildest dreams, I would not imagine anybody would actually dip their hands into matters of life and death. I would never imagine that anybody would be happy to eat or enjoy the proceeds of corruption that comes from monies that would have otherwise been used to save lives in this particular country. And I really like today's debate because we can tie both together. And I like the spin by Steve. Steve has brought in the issue of Somalia, and it tells that much as they do not have what would be perceived to be a functioning government, they've been able to convict 4 in a record time. It didn't take a month. It didn't take 3, 4, 5 arms of government diving into it to address the issue, but rather the goodwill from the leadership. I'm actually encouraged by Somalia, and I hope that the Kenyan government can actually take a cue from the same. I'm also happy that we should move away from trying to prosecute people through newspapers and the print or electronic media, but rather through the courts. That is a positive thing. But having said that, I mean, when you think about corruption, I don't know what I would liken corruption to, but if you were to even imagine some of the challenges that corruption actually brings to us, you would appreciate that you cannot grow an economy with this level of corruption. I mean, it is wishful thinking that Kenyans still imagine that we can have a better country with this level of corruption. And you know what? Let's stop pointing fingers to those in government. Remember, we were actually told that every other time we have corruption, there is somebody in government, somebody from outside government, and occasionally someone from the corporate sector. So this is a collective effort that needs to bring everybody on board. I'm happy you're having this discourse on your TV, because then it actually makes Mwananchi much more enlightened. And I'm thinking we need to also offer some time to try and discuss how can we mitigate these corruption opportunities that keep on popping up and making it easier for people to actually steal from us. What is it that we can do to actually forestall this kind of corruption? I mean, look at the amount of monies we are talking about. How is it that this happens? And you know what? The aspect of having whistleblowers protected and having them support the system is something that should be celebrated. But look at it. We had a case around the Masai Mara University.
Yes.
I mean, it's been many months since that came through on TV. It's only yesterday when I saw the DPP preferring charges on those and saying that they should now be brought to court. Look at the time it has taken. Surely, can we afford that time with all these challenges of COVID with us now? I really like what I heard from the WHO SG saying or likening these to people who can only be seen as murderers. How can you eat from that which is supposed to actually save lives? And you know what? Nobody has immunity over this pandemic. So it is something that needs to be fought collectively. By not stealing, you're actually part of the team that is fighting corruption. So I would encourage each and every one of us, from whatever position, let's all collectively and with a single spirit fight this scourge called corruption.
Okay, the role of the common Mwananchi probably being painted right here with, what we've seen being done by the civil societies and the lobby groups coming out, going to the streets to picket and, demonstrate against all these acts of corruption. First, this is not the first time that we're seeing such a scenario, but in numerous ways we've seen this working towards getting solutions. But what are the likelihoods that on this one we are going to get answers, especially looking at how much also the police are always on standby to pounce on these civil society groups that march in the streets to protest these acts of corruption? Steve.
First of all, I think I must express my satisfaction with how the police has handled this the civil protests, because it shows how uncomfortable the government is with the kind of rights that the people enjoy, and one of those rights is the right to picket and to protest and demonstrate peacefully. So these people have been protesting peacefully, and it is unfortunate that the government has been really coming in and arresting them, and even not presenting them to court within the stipulated time by the Constitution, which is about just 24 hours. So it is quite unfortunate that the government seems uncomfortable. And while having this conversation about 10 years of the Constitution, number one, it shows that the government, even as it proceeds to recommend constitutional changes, it is uncomfortable with the kind of rights the people enjoy. I must commend the people who are really protesting, because they are showing a great feeling of patriotism, because Kenyan money has been lost, and this is money that could have helped us to be able to fight this virus. So I think these protests are a good show, and I have a feeling that they will, make the executive react to the kind of losses of money. And, we could even find certain explanations that, probably we'll never have gotten if this protest didn't happen. However, I have something that I failed to say in the previous discussion, and it is about audit. I think I must make a very big proposal to Kenya that it's something that was proposed by the President of Internal Auditors in 2014, that it is time that we embrace proactive auditing other than reactive auditing. Because right now, what we are going to do, even as these protests come, is that we are going to initiate a reactive auditing by the Auditor General, which is going to audit what has already happened. It is going to audit monies that have already been lost. So it is very easy to confiscate, to really hide some of the data and hide some of the funds that will give us evidence. But all we embraced and institutionalized internal proactive auditing, it will be very possible to identify theft and pilferage as it happens. But now we are going to have an issue of reactive auditing, which is way late after the corruption has happened. And that is why it is always very difficult to identify the corrupted, even convict them, because the evidence will always not be enough, because it is easy to hide evidence as you steal. But if there is a proactive system of auditing, it is possible to identify these thieves as they steal. So I really think that this kind of protests are good, but it shows a very bad picture of our country, a country which is in a very high level of corruption, that citizens have to protest for something to be done, and that the government cannot initiate action on its own course.
All right, the best action initiated by the government is that of seeing police trying to execute their mandate based on what they've been called upon to do. Well, of course, while they might try to alter or stop these activities of picketing, then one would want to ask, as they execute their mandate, this culminates to brutality in a way. Do you suppose that this brutality that is meted upon the few who are always out there on the streets to picket and, condemn the ills of the society, does it in a way alter also the war on graft, Gatwechi?
Ultimately, yes, and a very unfortunate case of police brutality. However, even as we look at it from a Mwananchi standpoint, I will always say that fighting corruption is a form of patriotism. You're actually being very patriotic to your country. Fighting corruption is also self-defense for you as Mwananchi. You're actually trying to defend that which is yours. Remember at the point when most of the industries that support Mount Kenya region were actually decimated by the previous government, we had intra-ethnic violence, the outage of the Mungikis, So every other time you're fighting corruption, remember you are doing it for self-defense. However, when it comes to the institutions you just mentioned, the civil society, and I am not pointing a finger at any one of those. However, it's very unfortunate that every other time we have an unfortunate situation happening to us, that's when they come out very strongly to try and fight and show that there's something happening. Whilst we know that these institutions receive millions of shillings from their sponsors, what we would have rather wished to see is a situation whereby these civil society come up with the triggers, things that we can actually be able to see and say that there is a likelihood that corruption is about to get underway here. And what is it that we can do to stop it? Just like my brother here just said, this idea of us being reactionary does not save or support anything in the government, because we are talking about monies that have already been lost. Can we possibly then look at it and say, are there some triggers that we can put in the system to tell us when certain systems have been floated and there is an opportunity for somebody to sneak in some form of corruption to steal monies that were meant for Mwananchi?
These are diversionary tactics, Gatwechi. These are diversionary tactics. Then how do we deal with that? Because even when you go online right now, the conversation is, like Tanga Tanga versus Kieleweke, those who are President Uhuru Kenyatta and those who are allies of the Deputy President William Ruto. It has culminated to that. In that, there is talk that, it's unfair on how, of course, you deal with allies of the Deputy President William Ruto when corruption allegations are there in comparison to how you're dealing with this. And in what has been painted, probably what could inform that need of having the Auditor General coming out with a clear report. Reality is that people have already started pointing fingers at certain figures that should be implicated on this. What does it speak, and how then do we get ourselves from that aspect of diversionary tactics and address the issues?
It's unfortunate, and corruption must be called as it is. This idea of trying to look at corruption from the lens of the deputy president's wing or the president's wing should actually not be anything that we want to discuss. Corruption should be called for what it is. Every other person should actually rise and fight corruption. This idea of shadow boxing should not be there. And I can tell you, much as they are proposing the Auditor General's office, you can recall just a couple of weeks ago when she was actually appointed, we still had people trying to point fingers at the appointment of the good lady, some of them saying that she comes from a particular community and she might not be able to serve the people of Kenya in the best interest of the Kenyan citizens. So at the end of the day, let's talk about it the way it is. I'm happy you're giving this particular situation an opportunity to be ventilated on TV and even social media, especially the youth. Stop being used by politicians to actually paint people differently based on their political affiliations.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for the great insights this morning. I think unless there's something else to top up on the conversation, it is a conversation that is ongoing, or conversations that are ongoing based on the issues that we've touched. And we can only hope that justice is going to be served for the sake of the growth of the nation and the growth and development of the common mwananchi. That is Kamau Gatwechi right there, governance expert, and Kijana Steve for the great insights also. Like I said, Kijana Steve is always a household name right here, expounding more on issues that affect you and me. That's where we get to wind up this session on the current affairs as we look forward to the developments, and we'll be here tomorrow again to update you on the same. We cross over to a different segment on Martha's relationship, a conversation that you do not want to miss out on. Alan Lawrence and Nancy Rahab are the psychologists of the day. They'll be joining us as we take a look at situationships and, those moments where you are having a relationship for the sake of the situation, or trying to get remedy, trying to get rebounds, just so you can deal with your heartaches at that particular time. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? As we cross over to that, make sure that you're part and parcel of the conversation. Hashtag Morning Cafe as always at Linda_Alela at TV47KE. After this break, we're right back. right, and welcome back to the session. It is the last lap. Wanachiita kipindi cha lala salama. It's going to be an interesting session right here as we talk about entanglements, situationships. Most of the people will tell you that they found themselves in such a state. And you ask yourself, are you doing the right thing? Are you not doing the right thing? Does it make you feel good? Are you satisfied? Are you scared of tomorrow? That's exactly what we'll be discussing this morning. We ask candid questions like, is entanglement cheating? How does it make you feel? What gets you into that situation? Joining me, psychologist Rahab Nancy, who's going to expound some more and tell us, on a professional perspective, whether this is healthy or not. And we'll also have Alan Lawrence, equally, a psychologist, and of course telling us the take and, sort of sharing their experiences in regards to the same. I wish I'd be able to share mine, but because I'm not allowed to, I'll allow the lady and gentleman to start by sharing their experiences and tell us, those small secrets on whether they found themselves in this situation where, you are in a relationship with someone just for the sake of being in a relationship, or just to cover up a scenario, more of a short-term, entanglement, let me use the word, so that you're able to, satisfy your feelings, satisfy your desire at that particular time. Commonly what people would call, friends with benefits at some point in time also. So, Nancy and Alan, karibuni.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you this morning. All right, so we start off. What exactly is entanglement or situationships? Do they mean one? Are they one and the same thing? Do they mean more or less the same thing, or there's a difference between the two, Nancy? Nancy, can you hear me? Well, I'm not able to get Nancy. Alan, are you there? All right, looks like we've lost the two. Yeah, that is courtesy of technical hitches, but not to worry. The network will always get you down, but all the same, we're going to fix this. It's important that you be part of this discussion. Now that you already know what we'll be discussing this morning, it's all about entanglement or situationships, where you find yourself in a relationship, whether with a married man, a married woman, or just somebody for the sake of dealing with a situation at that particular time. Probably a relationship that you'd not be comfortable or proud of. But then again, you find yourself into it. So we take a look at what could involve you, or what could get you involved in such, and what are some of the scenarios where you find yourself doing this, and whether you get satisfied, whether it serves the purpose, whether it doesn't serve the purpose. Remember the numbers to call. We're rolling down on your screen, and equally the SMS short code. But importantly, on our social media platforms where the conversation is streaming live, that is hashtag Morning Cafe, that is on Twitter, and also you can loop us, or you can loop yourself in on Facebook, that is TV47. You can also drop your comments at Linda_Alela. I get to sample them as we proceed with the broadcast. As we try and get a hold of Nancy and Alan, let's take a quick breather, and we come back with them and expound some more on the same. With Alan Lawrence and Rahab Nancy to expand on more on matters, situationships and entanglements. Are we back, Nancy? Yeah, good to have you again. Sorry about that. What exactly is the difference between the two, or they are one and the same?
Repeat the question, please, Linda.
Or in matters, situationships and entanglements, where you get yourself involved in relationships that you probably are just having for the sake of, calming or quelling the issues at the moment, benefits at the moment, but you really are not looking at a long-term perspective of it. And in most cases, you find that people are there without planning to or without liking the fact that, yes, they are there. Can you hear me? Lawrence, can you hear me? There must be a problem on the systems. I do not know why the network will not allow us to have this conversation. Again, we lost Nancy, and I'm not even able to get a hold of Lawrence, but we keep trying to see whether we can be able to get a hold of them. Meanwhile, I will be expecting you to be part of this conversation. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela TV47KA, the social media pages where you can drop your comments, your take on this conversation. I'm sure at some point you've probably gotten yourself into that point where you have contemplated getting into entanglement with someone, say somebody's husband, somebody's wife, someone who's probably not you're not in an agreement that yes, you are in a relationship, you're husband and wife, or you are, boyfriend and girlfriend. So these are situations that most people will tell you are very hard to manage because in most cases they are demanding, and what is demanded is probably something that you're not proud of, giving, or you're not happy of giving. And sometimes actually not even demanding, because you find that, it's just about enjoying the moment. So we ask you this morning whether you'd want to be part and parcel of such an agreement, and the benefits to it and the disadvantages to it. Again, we take that break as we try and get a hold of Nancy and Alan Lawrence, who are psychologists, to tell us on a professional perspective what would be the advantage of this and what would be the disadvantages of the same. So we're back after that. Well, and unfortunately, due to unavoidable circumstances, we've not been able to have that conversation. But we promise and guarantee you that we'll be here to have a conversation some other time with the very same guests in what it is that they have prepared to enlighten you. You can be rest assured we'll have it on the right opportune time. Thank you so much for keeping it TV47. And that's where now we're going to wind up the session. That is Morning Cafe. I look forward to see you again tomorrow. My name is Linda Alala. Do enjoy the rest of the day.